We all have beloved memories of Rick. But are we really supposed to believe that a mad scientist inventor with a flying car just showed up on our doorstep after being gone for years?
Yeah, not gonna lie, that would be a stellar AU. Hi, I'm Kitty Monk, and I'm here to talk to you about Starverses, or more specifically, Glossaryck.
Sir Glossaryck of terms.
Sorry, I forgot he had a full name. Now, I know we all like to rage on Star. Despite being the protagonist, she has a lot of flaws. She never really grows, and she does commit some pretty bad acts the show glorifies. Her worst crime by far was killing off a good chunk of the multiverse, or what amounts to having a really bad day. In retrospect, mainly when it comes to destroying magic, I am beginning to consider that Star doesn't totally deserve all the blame. Yeah, she committed the act, but somebody led her down that dark path. And no, he wasn't a hidden figure. He was there, in plain view, right under our noses, gobbling up heaps of pudding, and we never fought twice. That menace of the multiverse? So this is gonna be a different kind of video. Usually when I discuss a character, I tend to start from square one, say whether or not I dislike them, and give some kind of writing problem I think the show could have better addressed. Instead of making the video linear, I'm gonna be all over the place, but I will try to stay as organized as possible. Think of this video as a mix between my usual videos and the videos I made on Dagmar and the Blight Twins, where I just list reasons, instead of actually summarizing what happens. Sound good? Alright, let's begin. Back when I watched Starverses, I didn't really mind Glossaryck. I actually found him to be kind of funny. Despite all the criticism I usually levy, jerk characters are some of my favorites. I mean, I love the show Squidbillies, including the final season, just of how outrageous the Kylers can be. Of course, I wouldn't want to be around them in real life, but in a cartoon, it's funny. It fits in with their world. And when somebody like Early suffers, he suffers, especially in the finale. As for Starverses, the times where Glossaryck suffered were just as funny as the times where he was a huge jerk. Perhaps my favorite Glossaryck episode was The Hard Way, where he had to tutor Ludo, and I like it simply because of the new dynamic and how hard Ludo unintentionally tries his patience.
She just used her imagination for most things.
Oh, what's an imagination?
Okay.
Then there's the episode where he acts like Star hurt his feelings, so he spends it sulking in a donut box, only for them to reveal he mostly did it so she would actually study.
So you're saying you did all that on...
Boom nugget!
Fine.
Did they make a commercial out of this? I think I saw it when I went to the Lego movie. To be fair, there would be times when he got on my nerves, mostly in season 3, but I can say that for any character. When I had to rewatch episodes he was in, well... on one hand, he was still pretty funny. On the other, I had tons of questions the show never answered, and I still don't know how to feel about him. I don't think he's a bad character, but like Toffee, a little more explanation in universe and not on social media would have helped. Despite laughing at the occasional joke, it became more apparent he wasn't the wise master they made him out to be. I think it goes without saying that this little blue mother is responsible for every bad thing that happens. In this messed up world, Star's Anakin Skywalker, and Glossaryck's her Palpatine. It might be a radical thing to say, but it wouldn't be a stretch to imply that the true villain isn't Toffee or the MHC or even Star herself. It's him. But I'm sure we aren't totally familiar with this dude, so like always, I'll give a little background. If you couldn't guess, Glossaryck is an important character in the world of Starverses. At first, he's just a comic relief, a mentor who's been around the corner a few times, but doesn't actually want to help you unless you force his hand. Sometimes it's out of laziness. Sometimes it's because he plays mind games to get you to do the hard work. Or so he says, it depends. Later we find out there's more to him than meets the eye. He was created at the beginning of time, personification of magic, an omniscient, all-knowing being who was there to help them humans learn about the processes of the universe. Despite being such a powerful being, he's bound to the Book of Spells, advising and teaching those who possess it, mostly the Queens of Muni and their daughters. And if the book goes, he goes. To this end, he created the Magic High Commission, 5 influential beings who protect and enforce the rules of magic.
Children, the only thing I wonder is why you waste my time.
Technically, this means Glossaryck has a family.
Here's a free extra lesson for you. Don't have children.
In fiction, family is usually one way to show a jerk character isn't totally heartless, and this means they have somebody to care about and do right by. Yeah, this doesn't apply to Glossaryck. I'll just come out and say it, he's a deadbeat dad. Now, again, this isn't always a bad thing. Cotton Hill's a horrible dad, and I find him funny, simply because he's meant to be over the top, and they do give him the occasional good moment. In most shows, the reasoning for poor parenting is explained, even if it's as simple as, I don't like you. With Glossaryck, it seems he's He's so rude and dismissive because he knows they can't fight back. If Romulus puts him in a crystal, he knows he can break out, no problem.
Excuse me. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude. Getting stronger, though, huh? That's good.
Hickabu can't just send him to another dimension. He's part of the book. That's like stealing a national treasure. If that's why, then he's a terrible person. Did you ever have a dad who said he was going out for a pack of smokes and he never came back? He's better than Glossaryck. With Hickabu and Omni, we don't really see him bond with them, so I argue he isn't too harsh. But to the rest of his brood, yeah, diapers should definitely be called. To Romulus, he always puts him down. You see that fancy crystal in Glossaryck's head? Romulus gave him that. And Glossaryck couldn't care less, or even say thank you. It's to the point where, when Star loses Glossaryck, Romulus has no problem keeping quiet.
Glossaryck's gone? This is amazing! I mean, it's actually really bad, but it's good for me. But yeah, wow, I mean, that's bad news for the universe.
Then there's Lekmet. Now, while he created the Magic High Commission to help Muni, each of his creations had some sort of purpose, beyond enforcing the rules of magic. To help humans understand, and I'm quoting the wiki, the impermanence of magic, Glossaryck made it so that whenever Lekmet used his powers, he'd lose more and more life force. Basically, Lekmet is an immortal, and Glossaryck created a son with this defect. How cool! No wonder they threw Lekmet a funeral and not Glossaryck.
And Lekmet said,
Actually, let's look at this in a new light. The Book of Spells implies Glossaryck dying and coming back has happened multiple times. The current Book of Spells isn't even the original. Skywind just wrote it after the first one burned up in a fire. At least with Lekmet, they know he's gone. Glossaryck, they probably figured, he knows his way home. Give it a few days. The worst is probably his relationship with Ronaldo, the bald pate.
I really don't want to see Ronaldo today.
For millennia, he was considered boring and by the book. About a century and a half before the show, Reiner the Riddled unwittingly cursed him with a babble spell, meaning he can only talk in either rhymes or riddles.
I can fill a room or just one heart. I cannot be shared, only apart. What am I?
Loneliness.
This got on everybody's nerves until he was forced to retire and become ferryman to the River of Time. Do you want to know who his harshest critic is? His dear papa.
Who speaks in rhyme and wanders time with none to call his family? No phone calls, cards,
Thank you, Ronaldo. Please be quiet.
Plus, Glossaryck pretends to like Romulus. Ronaldo, he wants nothing to do with him.
No game of catch, no father, no home.
Hey, Ronaldo.
Father!
Yeah.
Simply because he has a speech impediment. A speech impediment brought on by magic that I'm sure Glossaryck would know how to fix, but willingly chooses not to. Why does this remind me of Bridgerton? However, this isn't the worst aspect of Glossaryck. The complaint I often give Star Verses is they make it obvious that while maybe one or two things were planned, they didn't really have a story in mind, and they mostly made things up as they went along. When it came to Mina Loveberry, I described how she got what I like to call the Elijah Michelson treatment. In a nutshell, this is when a character is supposed to be one-off, but the crew finds a way to expand their presence, oftentimes because they like the actor's performance. Despite what I said about Mina, I don't think this is always a bad thing. Plankton got the Elijah Michelson treatment, and so did Atticus. I don't think either show would be as great if it weren't for them. I believe the issue usually comes down to the character doesn't fit in with their new role, or they suffer from overexposure. Overexposure they didn't need. Looking back, I feel like Glossaryck got this. In season 1, he felt like a totally different character. First off, there's the voice. Is it just me, or did Glossaryck have this weird accent that always came and went?
Maybe we can work something out? Pudding.
What?
I want pudding.
Pudding?
The second is his role. In Muberty, Glossaryck's the personification of Star's spellbook, hence the name Glossaryck of Terms. And you know what? I can buy that. The spellbook is so ancient, you would definitely need help understanding it. Maybe Glossaryck was created at the same time as the book, or the book got too big to navigate, so he was created to make things easier. Yeah, Moon and River go to him for advice, but that does not imply anything. He was a living Google, and as queen, of course Moon would know him. I have an inkling that at first, Glossaryck was just supposed to be Star's tutor. With the running gag, he isn't particularly helpful.
Should be back to normal by 3:57 p.m. Or she won't.
She won't what?
Be back to normal.
That's it?
He wasn't supposed to be a major character, more on par with somebody like Manfred. Or either Jeffrey Tambor's schedule cleared up, or they figured out how to give him a bigger role. For a while, this seemed to work. During season 2, when his presence got expanded, for the most part, he didn't do anything too bad. I loved the relationship he and Star developed. I liked how he made it clear that even if Star doesn't like to learn, he had faith in her when others didn't.
I'm not tall enough to go on this ride.
I'm not tall enough to go in any ride. but I've been on them all.
And he would often bend the rules her mom enforced, like not looking at Eclipse's chapter.
Now, I'm going to show you for a split second.
In one instance, he even calls out Moon in the MHC for treating her like a baby.
You all did this because you don't trust me, and what's worse, you don't trust Star. You have to have faith in her to make choices that are best for her.
He was probably more mad about the fact they made him go through a super frustrating commute, when honestly they could have just left him a voicemail, but you can tell his heart was in the right place. This season also expands on why Glossaryck is such a vital character. Outside of tutoring the queens, he's effectively this world's version of a god. He didn't create all, but he controls all. Since he knows what's gonna happen, he has to make sure things proceed a certain way.
Now, even though I knew this was coming, it's still kind of a surprise.
Yeah, I have a few issues with this, albeit it's more for personal reasons. Since he's omniscient, this means Glossaryck's technically a future-seeing character. I haven't said it yet, but future-seeing characters are my least favorite characters. They aren't all bad, but more often than not, they have a tendency to become living plot devices. Because they know what's gonna happen, you could just slap whatever onto them. Rant Stark. Or if you're desperate for a story, you can have them randomly get visions out of nowhere. For me, this leads to a lot of unfortunate implications, or in most cases, plot holes. And since we know Glossaryck has to ensure things happen, that puts a lot of blood on his hands. Blood the story ignores. Don't get me wrong, I think you can do this type of character, and make it work. My favorite American Dad episode is the one where Roger gains clairvoyance. That episode works because the story is more about how the family reacts to his power, than the power itself.
Should I take a bath tonight, or will I fall asleep and drown? Do I have to go to the bathroom?
The best future-seeing character, for me, is Bruno from Encanto. They make the point that it doesn't just come to him. He has to do a full-on ritual, and he has to interpret the vision. And part of his character relies on how people treated him like a plague rat, even if he wasn't using his power, just making general observations. The problem I took with Glossaryck is, like Toffee, they never give him a proper reasoning until it's far too late.
You'll never get him on your side.
But I don't have a side.
You don't, do you?
Regardless of what happened, he always helped Star. He acts cruel towards Star when she tries to rescue him, but the experience helps her learn how to fend for herself and make a new book of spells.
I thought we were friends.
Friends? Well, that's such a simple concept.
He had to insult Ludo, that way he'd throw the book in the fire, and Glossaryck could enter the afterlife and trick Star into restoring magic. But as time goes on, it's clear Glossaryck has his own agenda. It's not for the good of the universe. In fact, I don't really know who it's for, except maybe himself. After he comes back to life the first time, he acts like this removed all his cognitive functions. He can only say the word Globgor.
Globgor! Globgor!
And Star has to treat him much like a high-maintenance dog. As a result, he does very little, and he's often used to jumpstart conflicts, for comic relief, or both. This season is also notable, because it reveals the current line of butterflies are pretenders, since the Magic High Commission didn't like the idea of a monster gaining the crown. While the blame is pinned on Hekapoo, Omni, Romulus, and debatably Lethmit, nobody ever points a finger at Glossaryck, not even Star, and she's often his harshest critic. They just skirt around the issue. So I have to wonder, did Glossaryck help them imprison Eclipsa? If yes, was it because he had to, because it was his job? We never get a straight answer, so I have to argue that yes, he's at least culpable. Even then, there's a lot you could question. Did he think he was doing the right thing, but later came to regret it? Did he try to stop them, but they went behind his back? And he didn't learn the full details until they brought Festivia home? Is that why he doesn't get along with his children? Perhaps Glossaryck didn't like the idea of snatching an infant from her mother's arms, be it a monster or a human? The sad part is, this could have been an interesting time to shed some light on his motives. Maybe, despite all his talk about not having a side, he's secretly helping Eclipsa to make up for what he did. And because Star and Eclipsa are similar people who generally want the same things, i.e. peace between humans and monsters, perhaps he was doing all this to fix his mistakes. Maybe he used Eclipsa to fix monster-human relations, but then the Magic High Commission had to go and ruin it. Or he tried to help the butterflies, but they used him to carry on easily preventable wars, not even caring he's technically a monster. Then we get the reveal that Glossaryck was fine all this time.
No, no, no. Eclipsa's monster love Globgor. She's going off to be with him. I've been trying to tell you for months. Anyway, see you around.
Okay, I know why they changed his voice, and admittedly, the reveal was hilarious, but I just want to say, I kind of prefer Keith David to Jeffrey Tambor. Part of me feels like he should have voiced Glossaryck from day one. And yeah, I understand the feeling of judging a new voice actor, but it's kind of unfair. I don't say this because of stuff that happened behind the scenes, but I just felt like Keith embodied the cryptic side to Glossaryck that Jeffrey often didn't. He played up the whole, I seem like I'm off my rocker, but I promise there's a method to the madness spiel perfectly. And I have a weird question, but do you think Glossaryck had different voices in the past? Is it like each time he comes back, he just sounds different? Maybe if there's ever a spin-off and Keith David doesn't want to come back, they can always use this excuse. Now this reveal wouldn't be too bad for me. Maybe he didn't want to risk the MHT spoiling things, or he wanted Star and Moon to learn the truth on their own. You could say that, if it weren't for the Book of Spells. In one section, we get to see his bucket list. One item on the itinerary is say nothing but Globgor for an entire year. The spellbook for the most part is canon. However, all of this is small potatoes compared to the final season, where Glossaryck is at his worst. To be fair, he doesn't act this way until the end, but I want to touch on another issue I have. So, as Queen of Muni, Eclipsa technically owns Glossaryck, especially after he restores the spellbook. Except in like one episode, they never actually use him.
You may have created the warriors, but we pledged our loyalty to Queen Solaria!
The show had a terrible habit where whenever something happened, they would always write him out of the episode, like in Coronation or when the Solarians show up. Eclipse's issue was she can never use magic without the wand, so she doesn't think they make up for lost time. In the episode Meteor's Lesson, the implications are staggering. One night, Eclipse has to attend a dinner with the pigeons, so she leaves Janet to babysit Meteora. Since Janet is easily distracted,
Meteora. Down here. Hello, princess.
even though it doesn't seem that way from the offset, this is one of the most lore-heavy episodes of the whole show. By accident, they end up traveling to various historical events.
First settlers of Muni. That's you.
Wow.
Mind if I borrow your rattle? Meeny, meeny, muni, mo. Okay, you, Mo. Here you go. Congratulations! You can do magic with that thing.
The second is Toffee, back when he was a rebel bad boy with a terrible haircut.
I've got a mullet, Stanford!
Glossaryck tells Meteora that Toffee broke his arm.
Oh, hold your horses. I'm sure Toffee had a good reason for doing what he did.
You were making that stupid leaf hat, so I snapped your arm.
And when Toffee tries to break the other one, she activates her magic and dips down.
Okay, that's enough, Meteora. Meteora!
Then we get the ending.
You know, I think magic's in pretty good hands.
So, this means Glossaryck was the driving force behind everything that's happened. He was the one who got the American settlers to become the Mumins, thereby starting the conquest of Muni, the Great Monster Massacre, and by extension, Stump Day. He was the one who got Toffee to abhor magic, thereby kicking off the war. He was the one to create the wand, and come up with the idea that Muni's run by women, which led to Muni becoming matriarchal, Skywind giving into public opinion, and giving birth to Solaria, the monster carver. And far-reaching consequences we see to this day. It all goes back to him. Knowing this, let's revisit the scene where he's crying about Comet.
Your mama's gone.
I know.
She's never coming back. And I really liked her too.
If you go with he isn't just doing this to teach Moon, there's a few ways you can splice this. Was he crying because he lost a friend, even if he knew it was her fate to die young? Or since he had to make sure things went a certain way, is he crying because he knows he was the one responsible for her death? By extension, Moon becoming an orphan. I'm sure you're probably all wondering why Glossaryck did this. So am I. The last few episodes do try to provide us with Glossaryck's motives. Apparently, he did all of this so Star destroyed magic, because it was the right thing to do. Except because of how rushed everything is, it provides more questions than answers. And honestly, it makes him a bigger bad guy than even Toffee. In the second to last episode, Star meets Glossaryck, who offers her a pudding. She enters his eye and bends to him.
I'm gonna destroy it.
What? And how are you going to do that?
Enabling Star, he takes her to the grandma room, or at least a version of it, where we finally see her completed tapestry. Star destroys magic, and by doing so, everybody will be saved. There will be cotton candy waterfalls, gumdrop trees, and we'll totally ignore the knock-on-wood effect it'll have on the geopolitical landscape. As a result, Star believes destroying magic will be awesome sauce, only to come to a harsh realization.
No magic means no Marco?
Actually, no magic means no Glossaryck.
She tries to find some way around it, but Glossaryck has to be the one to break it to her.
Ah!
What?
I think the tapestry is done.
Alright, I rage at Star all the time, but for once, I want to shift focus. I believe if it weren't for this scene, Star would have never destroyed magic, or tried to. Maybe she would have had that thought in her head, but I don't think she would have succeeded. You say all kinds of things you don't really mean in the heat of the moment. And Eclipse did provide certain alternatives, like using the spell with no name, or just fighting Mina head on. Star only did this because Glossaryck showed her an image of what he claimed was the future. Instead, in not so many words, this is what's gonna happen, don't try to change it. Star, and by extension the show, ignored the issue of what comes after simply because Glossaryck painted her future in the best possible light.
So my temper tantrum was right all along!
I know when I made that video on Mabel, some people commented I was too harsh. When it came to unleashing the apocalypse, it wasn't her fault, as Ford could have told her what the rift was, and Bill was taking advantage of an emotionally fragile child. And to that I say, okay, I see your point. I still think Mabel shouldn't have made a deal with Bill. The episode should have ended with her tripping, and that breaks the rift. I appreciate feedback, so let's apply it here. Star in this episode was emotionally vulnerable, and like I said at the beginning, this was probably the worst day of her life. Her boyfriend broke up with her, and he made it clear he wanted to cut her off. She returned home, only to find it was being attacked, the vanguard led by her former idol. And then she finds out her mother was the one calling the shots, simply for a petty reason, which would undo all the work Star has attempted. And then said mom continues to baby her, and won't take responsibility. And because of plot contrivance, said mom can't undo her mistake. And then Star's almost killed and forced to take shelter at the edge of existence.
Is there to talk about exactly? We can't go back to Muni because we'll die from a situation that you caused. So just stay far away from me.
Yeah, that's a pretty taxing day. Not that it makes her decision or the writing any better, but I can understand a little more why she was so rash. I feel if Glossaryck said something like, what about Tom or Ponyhead? Star would have taken a few extra minutes to think it over. You know what this means, right? Star's one-track mind is her tragic flaw, and it's the reason the multiverse is now in utter chaos. As we know, Glossaryck was the one who influenced her. I believe this wrecks her character more than the act of destroying magic itself. Star's biggest draw is she doesn't do what's expected of her. It's to her benefit just as much as it is to her detriment. The major lesson is it's not criminal to be an individual. Star is all about challenging the status quo. If Glossaryck told her at any point before this, it is your destiny to destroy magic, she would have found another method. I really feel like it should have been Star finishes Eclipse's work and fine-tunes the spell with no name to only work on Solarians. It takes care of the issue with the spell destroying everything in its path, plus what better irony towards Solaria. What makes this worse is we don't even know why Glossaryck wants this. At least with Star, they explain it as
It's the only way to stop Mina.
what benefit would he get out of no longer existing? Was he bored with his job? Did he generally hate magic? Was there nothing on but reruns? Did a magical man with 6 fingers kill his father? Peekaboo says she always thought magic did more harm than good, and we see no evidence of this on screen. Did Glossaryck think the same? If so, what led him to think this way? Like Eclipse, he really needed a flashback episode. This might sound crazy, but I think this ambiguity makes him worse than Toffee. Toffee not having a clear motive sucked, but what he did was still reversible. Unless there's some kind of a sequel show or reboot, which honestly I doubt it's gonna happen anytime soon. This change is permanent, and not to mention that by doing what he did, he killed not only countless innocent people, but his own children. Just because. He never mentions this, and he feels absolutely no remorse. He's just like,
A good captain always goes down with his ship.
yeah, but a good captain doesn't drag their family down to the ocean depths. Ronaldo had no clue what was going on. And while yeah, he probably helped with Meteora, he didn't unleash the Solarian warriors. So, Star, being manipulated, goes ahead with the plan. And you guessed it, magic's destroyed. Then we get one last tender moment between Glossaryck and his former student.
I'm proud of you, kid.
Okay, it is kind of touching, but the way he talks...
I can't believe you actually did it.
Yeah, he planned this. He planned this from the beginning. This show was just a massive game of D&D. He had the characters play it for his sick amusement. And since Starverse is owned by Disney, they can't outright say Glossaryck died. So he just up and disappears. That way, he can never live to face the consequences of his actions. And that was Glossaryck. I know, he got the moon butterfly treatment, but he fully deserves it. He manipulated history. He works by no logic but his own. And he's a terrible father. And all of this would be fine if they said why. Even if they just say, oh, well, he has a warped sense of peace. That would be enough. All of this points to the very real possibility that Glossaryck is a villain, perhaps the true villain of the show. Of course, I don't think that's what the crew had in mind, but with how little we actually know about him, it's easy to paint his actions in a negative light. But I do think they could have better explained where he was coming from.